People need food on the table. They need to get their rent paid. They need money in their pocket.
Their strategy's been all or nothing. And so struggling Americans have, of course, got nothing. Well, we're down to the wire, Madam President.
Preparing for a bitter winter as the U.S. surpasses tragic COVID-19 milestones. And with the worst yet to come, hungry, jobless Americans are looking to the federal government for urgent relief. Hello and welcome to Inside America with me, Ghida Fakhry. The coronavirus pandemic shows no sign of slowing down as health experts in the US warn of a long winter ahead. With federal aid set to expire before the end of the month and Congress stalling on a new stimulus package, COVID-19 is claiming the lives of up to 3,000 people a day. Over 100,000 are hospitalized, more than 280,000 are dead, and there are dire warnings from public health officials.
The reality is December and January and February are going to be rough times. I actually believe they're going to be the most difficult time in the public health history of this nation.
The stark warning from the head of the Centers for Disease Control came with another grim prediction. The death toll in the US could reach 450,000 by early February, as millions of Americans struggle to make ends meet. 12 million people could lose their unemployment benefits on December 26th if Congress fails to act. And as many as 40 million Americans could be evicted from their homes after December 31st, when federal protections expire. Meanwhile, at least 26 million people in the United States say they don't have enough to eat, and nearly a quarter of American households say they are experiencing food insecurity. Now, after more than 5 months of impasse in Congress, negotiations to provide some relief are gaining momentum, with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi moving closer to an agreement on a $908 billion stimulus plan. But time is of the essence, with members of Congress getting ready to head home for the holidays and President-elect Biden making his position clear.
Congress and President Trump have to get this deal done for the American people. But any package passed in the lame duck session is not going to be enough overall. It's critical, but it's just a start. Congress are going to need to act again in January.
One of the people who will consider any new relief measures that will come before Congress next January joins me now. Congressman-elect Jamaal Bowman represents New York's 16th congressional district, which includes the Northern Bronx, a former middle school principal who defeated 16-term Democratic incumbent Eliot Engel, who chairs the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman-elect, first of all, congratulations on your victory.
Thank you so much. Real pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. It's good to have you on the program. Now, you are one of the new wave of progressive leaders who say they're willing to challenge the status quo and take on the leadership in Congress. Millions of Americans, as you know, are waiting in despair for both parties that have been wrangling for months to finally agree on a stimulus package. Where does the blame ultimately lie today, with the Republicans or the Democrats?
Well, the blame lies squarely with the Republicans, and very specifically Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, who's the Senate majority leader. Unfortunately, Republicans have not been negotiating in good faith. They do not want to bring aid to cities and states. They want to bring a minimal amount of cash payments to people who are struggling. Democrats passed the HEROES Act many months ago in the House, and unfortunately, it's been sitting, gathering dust on the desk of Mitch McConnell.
But Republicans, Congressman-elect, Republicans will say that they, in fact, were negotiating a $1.8 trillion package. The White House was. Democrats walked away from it because they wanted $2.2 trillion, and now they're getting less than $1 trillion. Bernie Sanders actually said it was a mistake. And there's been a lot of finger-pointing among Democrats. The moderates, the centrists, are blaming progressives like you on the left. You're not in Congress yet, but those on the left for the loss of House seats in the last election, and now for not being willing to compromise on this plan. Are progressives overplaying their hand too?
Absolutely not. We have to be very aggressive in our negotiations. The American people are hurting, And even if we do compromise in this moment for this stimulus package, we have to go right back to the table to make sure that people who have lost jobs are getting $2,000 a month, $600 a week, and they're able to feed their families. And we also need a blockade and a cancellation of rent and mortgages as well.
But by insisting on everything, don't you run the risk of getting nothing at the end? Because clearly the Republicans have rejected more than one proposal that the Democrats have put forward.
Well, we're very thankful that Republicans are going to be out of power very soon, especially if we win these 2 Georgia Senate runoff races. Then Mitch McConnell will be disempowered and Democrats can take the country in the direction that we need to go.
In the meantime, though, what should leading Democrats on Capitol Hill do? Because Senator Sanders says he will not vote for the bill. He'll vote against it as it stands today because it, quote, provides 100% legal immunity to corporations whose irresponsibility has led to the deaths of hundreds of workers. It would continue to provide a get-out-of-jail-free card to companies that put the lives of their workers and customers at risk. Senator Sanders wants every American to receive at least $1,200 in direct payment. He doesn't want to compromise. How likely are Republicans and other Democrats to accept the demands made by progressives like Senator Sanders and Elizabeth Warren?
We need to understand that unemployment insurance ran out months ago, and individuals who lost jobs were only able to receive one $1,200 check. So we are way behind. People need cash payments now. People need their rent and mortgages canceled and blocked now, in addition to supports for states and cities. I stand with Senator Sanders and I support him and Elizabeth Warren pushing back. This is part of the negotiation. Corporations continue to be left off the hook. It's unacceptable. We can no longer tolerate that.
It's worth pointing out that your district includes one of the poorest counties in the country. The Bronx, the north of that county, it has a poverty rate of 29%, and 40% of its population under the age of 40 is living below the poverty line. Unemployment is nearly double the national rate. How far would the stimulus plan actually go in helping those most affected?
It would be huge. And let me also say that in the Bronx, we have the highest rate of COVID cases per capita in the entire city. Highest rate of cases, highest rate of hospitalizations, highest rate of death. People have to put food on the table. They have to survive COVID. They are majority essential workers, so they cannot stay home. They have to go to work, which is why we also support hazard pay. The Bronx is hurting. Yonkers is hurting. Mount Vernon is hurting. New Rochelle is hurting. And these are all areas of my district where the poverty rates go as high as 30%.
And hunger, as you say, has become a very real issue, not just for people in the Bronx, but for millions of Americans across the country. The food insecurity rate in the Bronx is 17.5%. But the latest national figures show that 1 in 8, that's about 12%, of Americans say they sometimes or often don't have enough food to eat. In households with children, 1 in 6, about 16%, say they sometimes or often don't have enough food to eat in the past week. And then 22% of Black U.S. households reportedly are going hungry. That's more than 2.5 times the rate for white Americans. Just how alarming is this trend, and what is being done about it at the national level?
So hunger and poverty were issues even prior to the coronavirus pandemic. The pandemic has revealed what we already knew about poverty and hunger, particularly as we talk about the Black and Latino community. We're not doing nearly enough at a federal level because we continue to allow wealth to be concentrated in the hands of a few. We've allowed Jeff Bezos to become the first 200 billionaire in world history, while almost 300,000 people have died from the pandemic. We allow large corporations to hide billions of dollars in offshore accounts. We do not have a wealth tax. We do not have a progressive tax for the wealthiest Americans. At the same time, we have Black, Latino, and poor white children suffering through hunger, suffering through undereducation, underfunded schools. And here's another thing, too, that the virus has revealed. If there are children who used to get breakfast and lunch in schools who are now on remote learning schedules, they're not able to access the food that they used to get in schools. And we haven't figured out a system to get food to them in their homes. So it's a dire circumstance, and it's rooted in historical racism and oppression that this country still hasn't gotten beyond.
And you know this far too well, being a former school principal. The vast majority of children, especially today, in disaffected communities, are relying on these free lunch meals at school. They're a lifeline. You wrote recently that children in the US are in grave danger of malnutrition and starvation. It's startling to hear that the wealthiest country in the world is facing this problem. You say you saw kids drinking soda for breakfast and families going hungry. And now more than 50 million people, including 17 million children, could face food insecurity this year. Do you see things changing under the next administration? You say you want an administration that will address this head on. Will you get that in the Biden administration, or will it be business as usual?
Well, it's our job to hold the Biden administration accountable. It's our job to continue to organize outside of Congress to make sure we win those two Senate seats in Georgia. And it's our job to work with Reverend Barbara and the Poor People's Campaign and many others to make sure every child in our country is fed and housed and clothed and receiving an exemplary education. For the last 50 years, we've been experiencing slavery by another name, and it's been economic oppression and wealth inequality. And the Biden administration has a racial equity agenda and has an environmental agenda that calls for massive federal investments. These are good signs, but we have to continue to go further. And that's why I support a reparations program to right the historical wrongs, to make sure we feed every child and give them the opportunity to survive and thrive.
Congressman-elect Jamaal Bowman, good luck in your endeavors. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you for having me.
Meanwhile, the nation's highest court is considering whether the Trump administration's efforts to exclude America's estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants from the 2020 census count is legal. Every 10 years, the federal government is required by the Constitution's 14th Amendment to count the, quote, whole number of persons in each state. The count is used to apportion seats in the U.S. House of Representatives based on the size of each state's population. It also impacts the federal funding states receive. In a July memo, President Trump wrote, quote, "It is the policy of the United States to exclude from the apportionment base aliens who are not in a lawful immigration status. Excluding these illegal aliens from the apportionment base is more consonant with the principles of representative democracy underpinning our system of government." If the Supreme Court rules in favor of Trump's plan, states with large numbers of undocumented immigrants, like California, Florida, and Texas, could lose congressional representation, while more seats are allocated to less diverse, largely rural states like Minnesota, Ohio, and Alabama. But with the Census Bureau's population count delayed during the pandemic, President Trump may not receive the required data before the end of his term on January 20th. Joining me now from one of the states that could be impacted is Gray Davis, former governor of California, which is home to nearly a quarter of the nation's undocumented immigrants. Governor Davis, California has more representatives in Congress than any other state. It does have the biggest population, about 40 million, and so it gets more seats in the House of Representatives than other states, 53 in fact, out of 435. But this could change. It could now lose 1 to 3 seats if the state's undocumented immigrants aren't counted in the census. How consequential would this be?
Well, ever since the first census, Ghida, in 1790, the census has counted all people, documented and undocumented, because the primary purpose of the census is to determine how to allocate federal dollars every year for roads, for bridges, for schools, for healthcare. And most people who are here without being fully documented came here for a better life. They want to work hard. They are paying taxes. They're raising their family. They're abiding by the law. So I see no reason to change a system that has served us well for 230 years.
What is motivating the Trump administration, in your opinion?
I have to believe from the first time he walked down that escalator in 2015, and announced his candidacy for president. And he started blaming Mexican immigrants for all kinds of problems that they hadn't created, that he had some political agenda. But the point is, immigrants make us a better country.
As you point out, they make massive contributions to the economy, about 1 trillion to the US GDP and about 20 billion in taxes. Do you believe, though, when President Trump, in his memorandum last July, when he mentioned one state that is home to more than 2.2 million illegal aliens, constituting more than 6% of the state's entire population, including these illegal aliens in the population of the state for the purpose of apportionment, could result in the allocation of 2 or 3 more congressional seats than would otherwise be allocated? Do you believe that he was, not explicitly obviously naming California, but implying California? Is it getting more seats and more representation and more federal funding than it should?
Well, let's look at the other side of the ledger, Ghida. Only 2 or 3 states contribute more money every year to the federal government than California. With Silicon Valley, we're the home of technology, innovation, life sciences, and the money just pours into Washington. So America's getting a good deal by having California as part of the union.
And the census you mentioned before obviously has an impact on the size of the delegation from California to the House of Representatives, on the funding as well. But it also is used to redraw district lines that could change quite drastically the political map of each state. How much does it matter for Democrats? California could also lose electoral college votes. Today it has 55. Next election it could have less.
Yes, and I think that's Trump's motivation from the start. California wasn't always a blue state, but for 1992, it's always gone for Democrats in a presidential election. But again, nobody from California is directing immigrants to California or Texas or Florida. They go where they're going to go. And the question is, how do they behave when they arrive? And most of them are model citizens, valedictorians, doing very well in school, very well in society. And we're all looking for the day when we have a fair immigration law that passes both houses of Congress and will put this issue to rest.
Governor Gray Davis, former governor of California, great pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ghida.
For more on the 2020 census debate, I'm joined by Tom Tancredo, a former congressman from Colorado who ran for president in 2008. A fierce critic of illegal immigration, he sits on the advisory board of the Build the Wall organization, which funds the construction of a border wall between Mexico and the United States. Congressman Tancredo, the Constitution is clear. Congressional seats should be apportioned based on, quote, the whole number of persons in each state. Should the number include undocumented immigrants?
I do not believe so. And that issue it really has yet to be clarified by the Supreme Court, because, of course, when the Constitution was written, there was no such thing as an illegal immigrant. The people who came to the United States during that period of time were settlers and that sort of thing, and so it didn't anticipate this phenomena that we call illegal immigration, the construct of a system by which people coming into the United States have to identify themselves, how long they're going to be here, and under what circumstances. That was really not part of the original discussion of the Constitution. So,
well, for 230 years, Congressman, the census has been counting each person living in every state on the basis of, quote, usual residence, regardless of their immigration status.
So what? They can be doing something wrong for 200 years too. It doesn't really matter. It has to be clarified. It just has to be clarified because the situation has changed dramatically from the time that the Constitution was written.
And even if it has, if undocumented immigrants are inhabitants of a state under any definition of the term, why shouldn't they be counted? Even conservative justices on the Supreme Court are skeptical of the government's argument. In fact, as you know, Justice Coney Barrett, who is a Trump appointee, said there's evidence that in the founding era, an inhabitant was a dweller who lives or resides in a place. It's quite simple.
Yes, that is exactly right. But as I said, I reiterate, the phenomena of illegal immigration did not exist at the time of the writing of the Constitution. Therefore, it has to be considered in light of the enormous number of people that have come here illegally. And therefore, you have to ask the Supreme Court for some clarification. It's simply a matter of going to the court. That's all this really requires. The Supreme Court needs to rule on it. Once it does, then the law can be clarified one way or the other. I think that is an important distinction. And so it's not saying that, I'm not telling you that if they decide that illegal immigrants should be counted with, there'd be some, certainly I wouldn't, I'd say, okay, it's done. The court has decided. All I ask for is that decision to be made, because I don't believe it was clear when the Constitution was written.
Well, the Supreme Court is considering the issue, but 22 states have filed lawsuits arguing that the Constitution does not define which persons must be included in the apportionment base. Several federal courts blocked Trump's plan, saying it was unlawful or unconstitutional. Let's face it, at the end of the day, isn't this all about trying to shift power from states like California, with high numbers of undocumented immigrants who tend to vote for Democrats, to other states that are more conservative, less diverse, more white, more rural?
Well, I don't know about more white, but I will tell you that there is undeniably a political motivation on both sides of this issue. Why do you think California wants the account to include illegal immigrants? Then why do you think they encourage illegal immigration? And that's another issue exactly that's one of the reasons why it should be adjudicated, because the reality is illegal immigration has become a political tool of the left to increase their numbers and to change the United States of America, as Obama has stated on more than one occasion. He wants to thoroughly transform America. Well, that's part of the plan for the left and massive illegal immigration. And it's got nothing to do with race. It's got everything to do with how these people vote when they come here and what will happen as a result of that to the United States. So,
but this is a reality, Congressman. Illegal immigration, until policies change and the issue is handled decisively by any administration, it is a reality. Can you deny the financial contribution that undocumented immigrants make? They pay taxes.
Yes, I can deny it entirely. I can deny it entirely.
Well, let me just give you the facts here. There's an estimated 11 million people living undocumented in this country. They contribute $1 trillion to the US GDP, 20 billion in federal taxes. Undocumented immigrants pay billions of dollars in taxes, while companies like Amazon pay zero. In your state, Colorado, in fact, they contributed more than $140 million. Don't they deserve to be counted, just like everyone else?
No, because, of course, the costs to the United States, which you did not add into that, are far greater than what they, quote, contribute through taxes. The costs for housing, for education, for incarceration. You can go on and on and on. Healthcare, all for illegal immigrants, and their costs, because they are oftentimes, more often than not, low-skilled, low-wage workers who many times are not even paid through a process that allows taxes to be collected.
And who many times are doing jobs that Americans won't do. Congressman, looking at the other side of the equation, you say that they take more than they give. But in fact, research has shown that too often they actually take up jobs that Americans won't do.
Well, okay. Now that's an interesting observation, because of course what it means—
It's a fact, it's not an observation.
That an illegal immigrant takes— oh yeah, it's an observation, because an illegal immigrant takes a job that American won't do for the price. You have to add that, for the price that would be paid to a legal American. And they take jobs from the poorest, from blacks, from Hispanics, all those people who need those jobs desperately. Those jobs are taken and their wages are depressed because of illegal immigration. So you see, there's another side to all of these things that you present.
All right, Congressman Tom Tancredo, former congressman from Colorado, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, you bet. Thank you for having me.
Now, there's little doubt that ongoing attempts to manipulate a national census, which is enshrined in the US Constitution, are driven by political and electoral purposes. With this and the long-standing practice of gerrymandering, the redrawing of district lines to favor particular outcomes, the goal of democratic representation is being thwarted. If democracy in the 21st century is predicated on the one-person, one-vote principle, then American democracy may well be in crisis. With rapidly changing demographics, the two-party system, which has offered a political equilibrium for over 2 centuries, could be at breaking point, with a large segment of the electorate convinced that the last elections were rigged and an incumbent president still not willing to concede. And so, in short, when electoral systems are designed to produce results that are at odds with true majorities, they too often obscure the economic realities and create growing disparities and ultimately hunger and desperation, even in the United States of America. There comes a point when the keystone of that system, hailed but flawed, will struggle to hold the country together, delaying the reforms that many call for before major elections, but forget the day after, can only buy you so much time. That's all from me, Ghida Fakhry. From all of the team here in Washington, thanks for watching.